Hey guys, this is Angel Zierden. We're super excited starting the podcast, the series. I don't have a name yet, so we will work on that. But I thought we would kick it off. I wanted to invite Hanky Hazelton over to talk with me about, just why we podcast, where we come from, what we're going to be talking about.
Hello, everyone. By the way, like she said, my name is Hanky Hazelton, and I am excited to just, I don't know, be able to talk freely and talk about a bunch of subjects that at times may be controversial. And obviously, we've talked a few times off of camera to say, like, oh, we definitely don't agree maybe on everything, but we'll still be willing to hopefully sit down and talk about some things and kind of ask each other, like, well, why do you necessarily believe it that way? And what leads you to say, like, this is right? Maybe I can learn something from her. Maybe I'll still be stubborn in my ways and be like, yeah, you're still wrong, but still be willing to listen to you from time to time.
Yeah. And I think too, politics, whether it is on local level, state level, federal level, everybody has an opinion on social media.
Oh, yeah. Well, everyone thinks that they're a scholar when it comes to, I guess, Facebook, that they can, oh, I'll start texting. It's like the whole thing with the bridge that just happened
Yeah.
and that, was knocked down by that barge. Someone, has been doing their investigation, but yet from what I've seen and kind of done my own investigation, is that it's just a normal guy who thinks that, oh, I know everything that there is about this. There's no way that a thing that big could shut off and there's no steering or backup. And it's like, okay, people are gonna always be people and they're always gonna think they know more than you. So be it, and you just let them have their time.
Yeah. I agree. And I think too, conspiracy theories, I mean, I wasn't that big on them. I still am not. But what I find really interesting is that even on the local level, they happen. And it is so fun sometimes. Now it's a little more fun, like when at first,
Depends on who it comes from, though.
yeah. At first, it was definitely harder on the local level to like watch some of this political stuff happen. But over time, I think it becomes a little bit more entertaining. And I don't feel the need to like comment anymore. I just feel the need to watch it. So
Watch it all unfold and turn into a disaster and a wreck like you knew
yeah,
it would.
yeah. And I think too with politics, I from a young age, like I knew from a young age when I was trying to talk to the governor of Alaska about Anwar, about why we need to drill on it, or having the abortion debate in 8th grade, or even during our Crosby teacher strike, like talking to the House of Representatives. One of the things that I really saw even as a child was that I didn't really care about parties. I cared about people, even at that age, and facts. And I think that that's kind of what, through that process, what drove me even today. I still don't care about parties. I care about facts. And unfortunately, in today's world, when it comes to politics, there's very little fact that you're going to find like on social media or even in conversation. And one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast is I have spent a lot of my life, currently and past, going and getting facts. And I have some really fun political stuff I'll be sharing in this podcast on the local level, on the state level. So it's really, I'm really, really excited because I've been really wanted to get some of this stuff out.
Well, if you get all your facts and information from like a Facebook or Instagram, there's some stuff on there once in a while it's true, but if that's what you're gonna bring to the table and be like, well, Hanky, this is what I saw on Instagram, I'll be like, all right, I'm already out, Angel.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. It's been nice being on your
Yeah.
podcast.
Well, and you actually go and do some investigative research, which
I try.
You do, but I also do, right? Not necessarily in the form of a journalism. I guess maybe you could consider some of it, but you want to know the truth. And the truth does not always sometimes mesh with like your thoughts and feelings initially on something. And I think that that's where people get it wrong in politics, is that they have an opinion.
Everyone's always gonna have an opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. But unless you take the time and effort to go and actually talk to other people, have relationships with people who don't agree with you. Get involved in government, whether on local, state. You're never going to actually know the truth. And
Hmm.
I'll be honest, I came into the political role all about transparency, and now I understand why transparency is not always.
So,
Yeah.
since you've been in the realm of even smaller local politics, are you still gung ho all about it, or is there some things that you wish that you wouldn't have kind of, I guess, put your foot into?
I'm still crazy enough to be gung ho about it. I think the bigger thing for me at this point, and I just got Senator Eichhorn's office just jacketed a bill for me regarding energy efficiency in public schools. And so even outside of being mayor, I'm working on big stuff, right? Energy and in housing and all these things at the state level. And I think the hardest thing about the city level for me is scaling back and understanding that, people are really passionate about things going on in the city. And I wish people would contribute a little more besides social media to solving some of that, because I personally like the issues more.
So, with having a podcast like this where you can kind of be more of your free spirited rather than if you're on, let's say, a board and you're supposed to be up there and kind of making sure things go smoothly, do you think you're going to be able to separate those a lot and not talk about certain things that and not call people out in a
Well,
way? Not that you
so
would to say, like, hey, don't like you, but within a
yeah,
respectful manner
yeah.
and not like slowly sliding it in there. They're like, she's talking about me.
I've actually learned a lot in the last year about how to approach those things, because I think going into politics, if you look at any freshman, right, whether it is the Senate, House, new council member, new committee member, whatever that looks like, you have a lot of ideas on what you think you're getting yourself into. And I think if you talk to any politician or any elected official, they will tell you it was not what they thought it was. And so I came into it with, a little bit more of thinking that if I gave people more time to speak, which I did, giving more transparency, which I have, that they would understand where I was coming from. But then I realized that there's just too many people that don't care about the truth. So it doesn't matter how much time you give them to speak, they will take advantage of that, and you won't be able to please everybody. And I think again, it just there's a lot of learning that goes into politics, and I think that that's where um, I've toned that down. With that being said, though, I really get tired of well, you're an elected official and you can't say that or you can't do that. And it's like, wait a second here. First of all, I'm a resident first. I'm a citizen first. I'm a mom first. I'm a wife first, right? Like those things I'm first. And when you have situations where people are attacking you personally or doing things to you that are outside the scope of that, it's like, no, you should be able to defend yourself, right? Like, so yeah,
Absolutely.
I will call people out. And I'm sorry, but maybe that's what's needed in politics today is more like realistic, not personally attacking people, but calling people out on if you said you were going to do something, if you didn't do it, we want to know why. Well, explain why, right? But don't for me, things have just changed. How I view it's just completely changed. I mean, I don't know, would you ever run for anything?
I mean, I would like to, but there's also that part of me, okay, I have this image, and I'm starting to get a little bit away from that. The older you get, the more mature you are and more sane, I guess.
Hope so.
Well, I try to be anyways.
Men
Um,
tend to take a little bit longer.
Sometimes. But I also understand that there are things happening within the world, higher level and in the local level, to you're like, I don't know if I can sit around anymore and like allow this to happen. But the least I can do is maybe put my foot in the race and hopefully gain that traction and prove to the people like, hey, I'm not here to mess around. I'm here to actually hopefully get things done. If not to say you follow me, but if you give me a chance, I'm willing to prove it to say, like, okay, here's a guy that we really want to get behind. So I
Yeah.
would like to get into politics. That is kind of a goal of mine. I've always had like a little bit of I guess you could say like an appetizer or something for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But there is that scary part of like, oh, not that I have really anything in my life to hide, but it's like Hank's always been this happy-go-lucky person. When you get into politics, it can be really rough and really
Yeah,
crazy.
that changes things, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, once you step into that role, you got to be ready for half the people to, now everyone's so encouraging, right? But once you step into the world of politics,
not like you
it
anymore.
yeah, it
This
turns
guy
ugly.
sucks.
It turns ugly really fast. And I always said too, I drafted my first piece of legislation when I, almost 10 years ago. And I learned really quickly that if I was inside the system, right? If I was a lobbyist, there were rules I had to follow. If I was House or Senate, there are rules I had to follow. And I was like, you know what? I'm more dangerous outside of the system. And even you look at the city council, what you see at a meeting, I mean, is just, it's not a good representation of like what the job is and like what's going on like behind the scenes. But there are still days that I'm like, I would be able to do more if I wasn't mayor, because every idea or everything that I bring to the table is automatically met with the criticism. And so
Mm.
I still believe that, yeah, being outside the system sometimes can actually be a better way to get things done. It's just creating a path for people to do that, and I think that, that's something else that I've learned, that people can make change. If they want change, they have to stop blaming government and start doing in their own communities, because that is the change. But again, that takes a lot of work, and some people
But I feel like
struggle
you
with
have
it.
a lot of the government, or even unfortunately, like in your position, where that is kind of held back. To where I was talking with one of my buddies the other day, it's like, my property, I should be able to do basically what I want on it.
Yeah.
But there are other people out there, governmental officials, who have this stack that's like 3,000 pages that says you can't do all of this type of stuff. And it's like, well, why can't I do it? Until I do something wrong, then that's where something should be brought up for you to say, like, okay, hey, you did wrong here. But for me to do these simple acts to where, oh, I need to have a community meeting and have the name, it's like, no, I don't need your guys', I shouldn't need your permission.
Yeah.
This is my life. This is my property. Why do I need, you just want your hand in everything. And that's what's kind of annoying about politics
Right.
that I've hated. And then again, kind of running back to if I was to ever get into it, I say yes, but I don't think I truly understand what I am actually able to do or not do, because it looks like from the outside, I'm like, oh, you have that maybe power. It's like, I'm going to change this, and that. It's like, how much can I actually do?
Right.
Am I just more of like the figure in front of whatever party it may be to say, like, okay, you can do A, B, and C, but X, Y, and Z is totally off the table.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, I hate this now. I wish I would have never gotten into it because it's not what I assumed it was.
Right. And that happens a lot. And I think that's actually a good point, because I've had these conversations about property before. And the issue is you can do with your property, but you actually can't either, because the person next to you still has equal opportunity or equal rights to the enjoyability of their property, right? Now, with that being said, I am all about, there are a lot of people who buy homes in cities without doing their own due diligence, right? Without looking up the ordinances, without figuring out what they can and cannot do. So they don't do the work on the front end, and then they come into that. And every city, right? It really comes down to, what does that municipality, what are those zoning and ordinances? And yes, you can change them, and we are actually now. We are completely redoing all of them, and that was, collectively something that we all had to vote on. So it is hard to come in as one person, obviously, to change things, but you have to, if you're gonna go into politics, the way that you're successful is to bring people with you, right? So like, build up those around you and work as a team to do that. And I think, again, and that's where some of the issues come from, that it's just the lack of understanding of the process, and the process sucks. It's government. It's
Well,
slow.
in my
It
opinion, no
sucks.
offense, but government and officials, you all kind of suck.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think the other thing too is, I think the majority of people come into government with the right intentions. I think the issue really lies in the fact that they didn't understand how actually to get the job done, and by, especially at state level, coming in and just blaming the other side and crucifying the other side. I'm sorry, but both parties are just to blame, right? Like, so it's always pointing fingers instead of
So for you, what party, I guess, do you align yourself with? Because you say you don't really claim a party.
I
Because I'll be honest with you. I know we can say like, oh, I'm independent and down the middle. Like I try to claim and think that, I'm a very rational person and I would say I want things down the middle, but that's just not how America works.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I didn't know you were gonna ask me this. Yeah, because I struggle with it. I do.
Okay.
Okay, I was raised, to a Republican. I grew up in Alaska. I mean, it was very much that conservative values. I mean,
You-
I debated abortion when I was in 8th grade, and nobody wanted to debate me. I mean, I have been.
Well, in 8th grade,
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's a little bit, that's a big one.
I've always loved debating. But
No.
it wasn't, when I got to college and I got to the U of M, it was culture shock because I grew up in Alaska and the northern Minnesota, but yet I was actually in my, was it sophomore year, on the LGBT group for the U of M, right? And back then it was very different than
Hmm.
it is today, right? Where
That's for sure.
yeah, I mean it is, right? And I don't know why that I wanted, I thought it was the right thing to do, and I feel like there are a lot of things in our world today. Unfortunately, it is unacceptable politically to have conservative values and still hold liberal values, because I think that liberalism is on a spectrum and conservatism is on a spectrum. And then they say, "Oh, pick a side." That's so hard to do. Honestly, it's very hard to do because I have extremely close relationships with people who are Democrats and Republicans that I can
Mhm.
sit down and I agree, at least middle ground wise, on every issue, because none of the issues are black and white. And it's less about the parties and more about the fact that the parties want us to have black and white perception on issues, and that's just not the way it is. So personally, I am a moderate Republican, but I've been told that I'm lying to myself and I'm a moderate Democrat. So I actually at this point,
So I gotta say, she's acting like a politician here
yeah,
because I asked you a question at the
yeah,
beginning and then it gave me this whole spiral thing. I mean, if you don't
yeah,
want to say, I totally understand.
yeah.
But,
No, I'm a moderate Republican,
okay,
but the
that's
problem
what,
is I'm not accepted by Republicans. So, I even went to caucus, right? I caucused with Republicans, and yet I went to the DFL dinner a week later, and there was, what? Well, why would you caucus with Republicans and then go to the DFL dinner?
so you were caucusing for both, or you were just there to support or just to
No,
ask
I
questions?
actually caucused for the Republicans, but then the DFL dinner is I went to it last year as well,
Hmm.
and so this is not new for me to be a part of both organizations, I guess you could say, and so yeah, I know I struggle with it because why is it that they're saying pick a side? Why is that where we've come to in this country? Because I really, really believe that the majority of people who are not in politics, who really are focused on raising their family, working, providing for themselves and their family, like, they don't really care anymore. I mean, we've become so engulfed in the party system that I think people are just shut off. And I have a really hard time with choosing because I just don't align with a lot of Republicans, and there are some, Democrats that I don't align with either, and that is the hardest part about it.
Right, I get that, but especially in the world that we live in where it's politics is pretty tough to get in, I don't think that you can have the I don't want to necessarily call it an excuse, but you can't really say, "Oh, well, I don't I'm this, I'm that." It's like, well, if you want people to get behind you, you kind of have to be one side or the other to get the following that you're
Yeah.
probably hoping for. You
Yeah.
can't be wishy-washy, and that's where I guess I'm kind
I'm
of
not
that's
wishy-washy on the issues, though. I
okay.
mean, I'm not, and that's where, again, that's the problem, because, and I think another thing with politics, right? Last night's council meeting, I voted for the city hall version that I actually did not think was the best long-term value-wise, but I voted that way because I knew that was what was best for the city staff, instead of it being what was best, what I believed was best long term value, right? So And that's the thing about politics. Just because you believe something, right? Whether, pro-life or pro whatever that is, that issue does not make good policy sometimes, right? Because if we only look at policy from a standpoint of the black and whiteness of it, it doesn't work. That type of policy doesn't work. There has to be more to it. And I think that that's where it's not about being wishy-washy. It's about saying, I believe this, but this is not always the case. And that's where it gets hard for me.
What does a perfect world, if we could ever have one, of politics look like for your journey?
I would love to see more of a independent following, an independent party, and that's hard to do. And I know that it's, there are people that have been successful in doing it. Actually, when Jesse Ventura, we talk about Minnesota being very purple. When he won, President Trump actually had come to Minnesota to learn from his campaign and him, the way that he did it, and then because that's how he felt. But ultimately, he had decided there's no way on a national level that he was going to win. So it's not that we talk about this all the time. The issue is at the ballot box. But I will say this, the issue is also the candidates, right? Like, we struggle already to get good people to run in our county, I mean, before even, not even like in general, because people don't want to put themselves through what we actually have to go through to sit in the position, and it's just not worth it for people. So we're never going to actually get there unless people work on themselves first and really come to that realization, and step up for themselves. They're always kind of looking for others to lead in that. We're not going to be able to do it until we get a big enough movement to do it. And it takes people who, again, are sitting down and saying, I'm just not picking a side, because I don't think that it makes sense. I'll be honest, when I have a bill, like I'm meeting, next week, to talk about another bill to get continuous glucose monitors approved for gestational diabetes, because I actually ended up having gestational. And
Is that like everyone, the local level? Like,
a
who's
state
this
level,
for?
yeah, it was with a senator, and
Okay.
that is a nonpartisan issue. That should be a nonpartisan issue, right? And the issue is every time I've ever gone to draft legislation or work on things, I've had to maneuver around who is in the majority and who is in the minority, because of all of, even on a partisan bill, because they use everything as leverage, right? And again, what we're seeing in the two-party system is it's not working and running and operating the way it was meant to by our founding fathers. It was supposed to be a checks and balances, and it's not. It's completely went to a different
Gotten a
level.
little bit away from that.
Exactly. So if we want good policy, and I mean, I look at some two women that I adore, was Condoleezza Rice and Madeleine Albright, who has recently passed, and they had an amazing friendship. They were both secretaries of state. Madeleine's father was a professor, and he actually taught both of them. So they called themselves sisters. And one day, Madeleine called Condoleezza and said, "Hey, you got to work on this campaign with me." And she goes, "Madeleine, I'm a Republican." And Matt's like, "You're a Republican? Why are you?" And she couldn't understand why she was a Republican. But, and when they did the master class together not too long ago before she passed, they talk about this and the diplomacy of it, and being able to sit down and say, you know what, we don't agree on everything, but that doesn't mean that we can't get things done. And that relationship, to me, should truly be a symbol to how we should operate today. And again, that's not being done. And that's the problem, and I just, there isn't a really good solution. I think that we just have to continue to build the relationships within our own communities and our own counties, and then slowly work up from there, because I think grassroots is truly where stuff happens.
With what you're trying to do and implement into government, with all the little things you're working on behind the scenes, are you starting to see some type of change? Do you feel like it's worth it, all the hard work you're putting in? Or is it still a long ways off, a lot of struggle? Where are you feeling and seeing like what you're doing is finally starting to take off, I guess?
On the local level, it is taking off, and I really credit, Denise and Kim just took over the Crow Wing County DFL, and I've been, they're also Breezy Point residents, and I've been huge fans of theirs. I think I adore them, and I really love what they're doing, and they're reaching across aisles, and I'm going to events, and people are shocked. You brought a Republican? Like, what? They're shocked, and I think that, again, that's where the change has to start. And I feel like if we can do that in our own communities, and if we can kind of put down, the pitchforks, and just, there are some people that will never get there. Like, they will not, but I see it on the grassroots level, and hopefully we can just continue to do that. I mean, do you have any friends who are Democrats?
Oh, I mean, I've got friends all across the aisle, Democrat, Independent, Republican. I don't know. But like I've said multiple times and maybe never like voiced, is that I don't really care who you are. Like, if I truly don't agree with you, I'm not going to be nasty about it, but I will try to pry and dig deeper and being like, well, why do you
Right.
decide to be that way?
Yeah.
Like, what makes you think that way? To try to have a rational understanding of realizing, like, okay, everyone isn't like me.
Yeah.
And,
Or came from your background, or had your
well,
experiences,
right.
or perception, or yeah.
So, like, I truly enjoy getting to know about how other people think, even though sometimes I'm like, that just does not make any sense.
I hear you.
I'm like, how
I
is that
do.
possible? And
Yeah.
like, you probably for the same reason someone would look at me and be like, how in the world can he be that way?
Yeah.
That makes no sense whatsoever. But I'm like, kind of like sporadic of like, some people kind of feel like they have me figured out, but then they don't. And then they're
Right.
like, okay, so like between the hair, sometimes the dress, sometimes like you talk about this, and then you talk about that. Like, who are you?
Yeah.
So like, I kind of like it better that way. But there
Yeah.
are people
So
who
you're
need
similar to me. You're not just
100%.
you're not just
Not straight
here's
and
who I,
narrow.
yeah. I mean,
There's a little bit of there's a couple curves in there.
but that is what that's what I love about you too. I mean, because again, I think that if more people would take out the political side of things sometimes, or at least ask why, right? It's not about what you believe, but sometimes just knowing what the why is, right? Because they may have experienced something that was different than what you've experienced. So they just have a different perception. And when you start to understand why people believe that, the way that they believe, and you both can understand where they're coming from, you can actually get a lot done, and you actually can build a lot closer relationships. And again, it is hard because everything is a trickle down effect. So, like from the federal government level, and that's just such a messy thing that it trickles down into state, into the municipality, and it sets a terrible tone. And I think that that's where we also struggle with politics. But crazy enough, I still really enjoy the complexity of it, and I I don't know why, but I do love politics very much so.
So besides politics, which can be very dicey at times, what else will the show consist of, or will you hope that it consists of, or that you want people to maybe bring to your attention? What is the main goal that you hope to reach with your podcast?
Yeah, so I think, well, one of the things I would love is that if people do have questions, right? Because I mean, here's like a really good story. I met a guy at State Central, um, and I let him know that I drafted some legislation, and he didn't know that as a taxpayer, that your tax dollars pay for you to go and draft legislation, right? Bring ideas to your senators and House reps, and do that. And I encouraged him to do it. I encouraged him to caucus. And 8 months later, he was voted in the House of Representatives. And it came down to really just like the encouragement, the information, and just being there for him. Him and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but that doesn't matter to me, right? Like, what matters to me is that seeing people who want to change the world, which, again, I mean, I think that, Steve Jobs said that people crazy enough to think they could change the world, the ones that do, to have that gumption and to have that drive to do something, other than sit on social media and comment, I will support you. It doesn't matter if, and I will also support you.
I don't know if I will.
Well, I will support you as a good person, right?
Oh, okay.
You have to be a good person. And that's what it
Yeah.
comes down to. Like, that for me is what is more important than, like, the political party. And unfortunately, politics does not bring out the best in people. So I think that that's going to be another issue. But I think the encouragement, I really want to, people to bring me issues. So if they want to have questions or issues, how do you do this? How should I do this? Talk about this comment. I want to do that. The other aspect of it is to talk through city government stuff. I mean, people watch the videos and they see social media, and I'm called the controversial mayor, and whatever
Nice
people.
title.
Yeah, I know, great title, right? But you know what though? Made you listen. So
Hey.
I
Got the view.
Yeah, we got the views. 1,000 views on one of the videos, so everyone's watching. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean,
No.
isn't it about time that we start
You
paying
need something to
attention
spice it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's about time we start paying attention to what's going on in local government. And so I think that, I want to give people more behind the scenes, right? Because I don't say everything at council meetings because I can't. Right?
Well, you probably shouldn't.
I shouldn't. You're all right. So I want to talk about local government. I want to talk about state government. I want to I want to tell some of my secrets or just things that I've learned about government and about politics that you would only really know if you're in politics. And so I think that it's going to be a little bit of a lot. But my daughter, she just she's working on a bill. She's in 9th grade. She had to choose a topic for a bill, and I was working with her on. She chose childcare, and I also want to sit down with her and have a conversation with her generation, right, about what her views on.
What do they even talk about at that age?
What is her interest? So it'll be definitely revolving around politics. On all, every level. I'm going to stay away from federal. It's so far out of reach for me. I really truly like to focus
right now.
Yeah, right now. But I really like to focus on things that I can control. I can do things in my county. I can do things in my state. I think that it's super important. And so, yeah, it's going to be fun. I really hope people listen and they learn something. And maybe I really want to see more good people run. And I want to encourage them to run. And I want them to feel like they can do it, especially women, especially moms. Because women are they're superheroes. And I wish they had, I think a lot of it is the confidence. But I hope people reach out to say, you know what, after listening to you, I want to do something in my community. I would absolutely love that if that happened.
All right, so now you just need a name for your podcast, and you'll be
I
ready to
might
go.
just be Angel Zierden. I think I might just leave it
Blonde in the pod.
Yeah, Angel Zierden. But so how's your podcast going though?
So I put out 2 episodes so far. The first one, I mean, I felt like I did pretty good on it. It was a half hour. It was longer than I expected because first off, like when you're doing something and you're like brand new to it, you're like, well, I'll just, do 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're like, holy smokes, half hour. Like I got to chop this down. But I didn't know like what to chop down. But I have like a very different approach to it and just how I am as like a person to where I don't always want to like cater to someone's feelings. Like not like deliberately
don't care about your feelings.
Well, right, not deliberately as in like, oh, I'm trying to make you mad and have you think of me as just someone who is trying to be, I guess for a better lack of words, like an a-hole. But I want to pick out and talk about things that it's like, okay, why isn't no one addressing the elephant in the room here? Like, yeah, it might be a tough subject to talk about, but the first one that I brought up was transgenders in women's sports.
I watched it.
And I get it, but it's sad that how it's so controversial to where, look, I'm not saying you have to agree with me. And I really didn't have any blowback. Mind you, I don't have the exposure yet that I hope to get one day. So I probably can count my blessings to say, oh, I didn't have my phone going off every second of like, how could you say or do this or blah, blah, blah. And mine was pretty mild for the most part. But I think I have a unique approach to most of my subjects is because look, I'm not looking to just take this and hammer it and be like, "Oh, I disagree with this." There's going to be times where I disagree with things, but I do want to try to come from telling the story of how it is and how you would read about it, but then try to come from both sides of saying like, "Okay, even though I don't agree with whatever transgenders in women's sports, I will try to come from a transgender side by saying like, okay, there isn't really anything for them to compete in.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, here, if we're talking about giving women their own rights for how many years and they've worked hard for this, why is it that a man who is making all these decisions to begin with is basically winning again?
Yeah.
To say, like, well, it's only been
I
years.
think things are changing though. I mean, I don't know if you've
Mm.
seen the like Thomas things where she,
Oh,
you
yeah. I
know,
mean, little by little, but there's still things that are happening to where it's like, I don't know. I mean, the main question that has to be asked is like, why aren't we asking Angel? But I also know too where it's difficult to where if you do speak up as a woman who it's like clearly, hey, this shouldn't be happening. Like I've worked a very long time to compete and be the best of the best. And then you have a gentleman who decides to be a woman all because I guess the world says it's okay now, or another man says it's okay now, and they beat you out, and now everything that you've worked for is just basically thrown in the trash. I think that's sad and
yeah.
horrible.
And I don't think everyone. I think that we
A
see this.
majority.
No, a minority. It's the loudest in the room. I mean,
Mm.
I mean, truly. I mean that we see that on every level of government. It ends up being the minority of people who are typically more extreme. They will be, they think that by screaming, yelling, and being loud,
For some reason, it
and
works
media.
most of the time,
Well,
though.
but you gotta understand too, the media makes more money off of those types of things, right? Because people they get a rise out of people, and so and I think with even that topic specifically, my issue is that I think that the root cause is actually where the issue is, and that's the mental health side of it. Because if there's a lot of um, studies and everything coming out, and these kids are struggling, right? These kids are struggling, and instead of making them a spectacle, right, we need to be getting them help. And I think that for me is where I would focus my energy on, is why is it happening, not necessarily, you know even though I don't support
But the
male
parents in
thing.
general need to. Obviously, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak on your behalf, but I would think as a parent that it's like, okay, if this is going on here, like, okay, not to say like where did you go wrong, but I need to have a serious conversation with my kid, not just allowing someone else who has not had kids just to make this ruling or go behind my back and say like, "Oh yeah, this is what they said they want, so this is what we need to give them." Well,
Yeah.
kids are kids. They don't always know what they want.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and that's exactly right. And I think again, where I struggle with the entire issue is that kids don't. Their brains are still developing, and they need support and help through that. They shouldn't be given anything that has permanent effects. I mean, if they had 18, if they, whatever they want to do, that's fine. But again, the way that I look at every issue again is that it's not that there's always other aspects to every hot topic that is less of a sexy topic, right? Like, so that's not what we're hearing about in the news. And so, like, where can we really make that difference? And sometimes it just takes time. Every generation has their thing, right? Like, I mean, but I think again, just talking about it, like you said, you're like, why is nobody talking about it? That's exactly it. And I mean, even in our county, in our cities, we don't have a lot of podcasts. I would say that this is
Not
very
a ton. I mean,
new to our area, but I think that it's definitely something that would, I think,
something with some
fun.
different varieties because there's
Yeah,
podcasts out there,
yeah.
but everyone has a different taste. Where there's some where it's like that's boring. Obviously, you're gonna have 10 different people if you show them this of what we're talking about right now.
They're
In
like, nope,
general,
I'm done.
I'd be
I'm
like, that is
not.
not aligned with my views at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so be it. Not asking you really to watch it. I just want to know and have people understand that when they watch my podcast, that unless I'm like truly, truly wrong and I'm picking on someone specifically, like, okay, I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, but it's going to be an unapologetic podcast. So if I say something, let's say hypothetically, just take you for an example, and it's like, Angel did A, B, and C, and I don't like her. Like, if I truly believe that, I'm not going to walk back something because I have 10 people or whatever comment or get a hold of me and be like, you're so wrong. Well, that's your opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can have that, but I'm not just going to change because you feel like a comment automatically says that I should do that. Like, that's what I hate about certain celebrities and different people out there, where it's like they come out with a strong opinion and then all of a sudden they walk it back.
Yeah.
With saying like, "Oh, well, I just want to apologize." Why are you apologizing?
I agree with you 100%. I can't. Don't apologize unless you actually have something to be sorry for, right? Like, I think a lot of people just apologize, like you said. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and you don't need to be mean, right? And I think that that's where people fail in giving their opinions, is that through the process of giving their opinion, they're mean. And you're not like that, so I'm not worried about that. But there's going to be people
It's never my intentions.
No, but I mean, people just don't care about other people's opinions to the point. You don't need to put someone else down to make yourself feel better. And I think, again, that's where a lot of this goes. So if you're just able to give your opinion and be okay with someone else who has a different opinion, we'd be a lot better off in this world, honestly.
Which, I mean, it's just going back to my podcast, the name of it, Honesty Unleashed. It's not me, Hanky being an a-hole. It's Hanky just saying, like, look, you're willing to come on the podcast. I truly want to ask this question just because I'm trying to learn and get to the bottom of it by being like, oh, okay, I have a better understanding of that. But if I just assume on some things, well, then I could see why it's like, yeah, I don't like that guy at all. But I've always had this attitude, and it's like, I don't know what you're going through. I'm going to hopefully try and brighten your day with the words that come out of my mouth and try to give you clear understanding of like, okay, I did my research and that's exactly why I believe this way. But I don't know. I'm just one person, may not change the world, but I enjoy what I do. Hopefully it turns into something bigger and better. But until then, I'll just keep cranking them out and doing my thing.
Yeah, but if you can change one person's perspective, or like, you are changing the world. And that's where I think people think they have to do these crazy big things to change the world, but you can change one person's world. And that alone is the world, to them. So I think that you just look at it from a different lens of just like, there's a lot of people that are going to agree with you, and there's going to be people that don't, but you want them all to still listen, right?
Oh, yeah. Whether you like me, hate me, or not, doesn't really matter as long as you continue to tune in and be like, what? I'm not really a fan of him, but what is she or he going to say this week? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, like, I know that you've done an episode by yourself on a topic. I have not yet. I will start.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon for sure. But I do think it's fun to have that interaction in a podcast because you play off of each other, right? Especially, again, who wants to listen to a podcast where everyone's just like, oh, you're right. Like, that's not...
Or when they're talking, it's like, well, you know what I mean, right? And it's like, no, I don't know what you mean.
Right. So there has to be... I love the, interaction. I love when people have different opinions. It's just a lot more fun to have the conversations that... and be the role model, right? Like, okay, we're going to sit down with someone that you disagree with on the topic, and here is how you could have a productive conversation with someone that you disagree with. And, I think that'll be fun. So I'm looking forward to it. Nerve-wracking. I mean, I think that, we're harder on ourselves sometimes because we're like, okay, we're going to put this out there. It's got to be perfect.
Oh, and yeah. Everyone's their own worst critic.
Yeah, I don't think that it needs to be. And, I know for a fact there's not going to, there's going to be people that absolutely think I'm ridiculous, but that's okay. I'm okay with that now. So
Where can people start to watch this, or when is it going to be out?
Well, I will set up a page. I don't know. I have not decided yet. I might disable comments. I might do it.
Oh, you can't do that.
Why?
Because you get to see all the nasty what people say.
We disabled our session, which I was very thankful for.
Yeah.
I haven't decided, but I probably
You don't okay, you don't have I'll take care of the comments. I'll read them and I'll decide on what you can look at.
There you go. That works. But in the next couple weeks, I will have one out. I think that I'm gonna focus on some of the city issues, just because there's been so much controversy around it, and unfortunately, a lot of people have not seen really what I'm doing outside of those meetings and like how those are applicable. So I think I'm gonna start with the city stuff, but I think even from today, I really want to hear from others, like what should I talk about, what do you want me to talk about, and I'll probably go into some other things about how I do things. So whether that is drafting legislation, I'll probably walk people through that. So in the next in the month of April, we will start putting them out, and yeah, we'll just see where it goes. I mean, I'm just excited because I feel like I have so much content, I have so much like in my head that I just like want to talk about, of like what I'm doing, what I've done, what I'm going to do. So I'm just excited. So how often are you going to be putting them out?
I mean, I'd like to do it once a week, but sometimes it gets stretched out a little bit longer, just depending on what else I'm doing throughout the week, work, etc., or the Tux Talk podcast. So we'll see. The goal would be once a week, but no promises. We'll see. Maybe once every 2 weeks.
Once we start getting going, it might,
Get a little bit better.
yeah, it might be better. So yeah, well, I mean, I'm super happy to get started and thankful that you were able to come on today. And yeah,
Anytime.
we'll keep going.
All right. Thanks. Stay
Thank
tuned,
you.
guys.
Stay tuned.